The cul-de-sacs of Willow Creek shimmered with suburban calm, trimmed hedges, pastel siding, the hum of sprinklers on manicured lawns. But beneath the polish, a quiet war brewed, fueled by the iron grip of the Homeowners Association and its Queen Bee, Karen Mitchell.
Welcome to Karen Chronicles. Before we begin, please like the video and subscribe to the channel so we can continue creating even better content. Thank you so much. All right, let's get started.
55, sharp-tongued and armed with a clipboard, Karen ruled the neighborhood like a dictator in sensible loafers. Her HOA wasn't just strict, it was a reign of terror, doling out fines like confetti, each one a jab at residents who dared step out of line. To Karen, compliance wasn't enough. Loyalty was the currency, and she wielded her power with a smirk that said she owned every blade of grass. James Carter, a 42-year-old mechanic with grease-stained hands and a tired smile, felt the sting firsthand. He'd lived in Willow Creek for a decade, raising 2 kids in a modest split level with a driveway that barely fit his family's 3 cars, his pickup, his wife's sedan, and his daughter's beat-up hatchback. One Tuesday, a neon yellow notice slapped onto his mailbox. HOA violation, excessive vehicles, fine $500. James blinked at the paper, disbelief curdling into anger. 3 cars? In a driveway built for 3? He'd seen neighbors park 4 with no fuss, Karen's cronies, of course. But for him, it was a $500 slap, no explanation, no appeal. Karen patrolled daily, her clipboard a scepter, her tape measure a sword. She'd snap photos like a paparazzo, Mrs. Lopez's marigolds deemed too garish, fined $100. The Guyan kid's basketball hoop 2 inches too low, another $75. Mr. Patel's lawn, half an inch past regulation, earned a $200 hit, complete with a smug note, maintain standards. Residents whispered about her reign, how she'd measure flower pots at dawn, peer through blinds, scribble infractions with glee. Yet her inner circle sailed free. Linda's tacky flamingo statue stood untouched. Bob's unmowed jungle waved in the breeze. Karen's rules bent for friends, a double standard etched in petty power. James crumpled the fine in his fist, the $500 a gut punch. That was groceries for a month, a car repair, a cushion for emergencies, not pocket change for a man juggling. Bills in a neighborhood that gleamed richer than he'd ever be. He'd tried reasoning once. At an HOA meeting, Karen's icy rules are rules shut him down, her posse nodding like trained seals. Now, staring at the notice, he felt the heat rise. This wasn't about cars or lawns. It was personal, a target on his back. Willow Creek wasn't a community, it was Karen's kingdom, and James was done bowing. The fine wasn't just paper, it was a spark, and he was ready to light the match. The neon yellow fine still burned in James Carter's pocket as he stood in his driveway, the sting of Karen Mitchell's tyranny fueling a fire he'd kept banked for years. Willow Creek saw him as a mechanic, grease under his nails, a modest life. But that was only half the story. Beneath the oil-stained overalls beat the heart of a shrewd investor. For 5 years, James had played a long game, one Karen and her clipboard cronies never saw coming. While they nitpicked flower pots and fined him for breathing, he'd quietly bought up 67% of the neighborhood's homes, 34 of 51 properties, through a web of shell companies, each deed a chess piece in a plan she'd never suspect. It started small. A foreclosure here, a cash offer there. James knew real estate, had a knack for spotting deals others missed. He'd saved every spare dime, leveraged loans, and masked his moves with LLCs named after obscure car parts. Axle Holdings, Gearshift Properties. Neighbors sold to investors, unaware it was him, the guy next door tinkering with engines. By the time Karen's HOA fines hit $500 for his 3 cars, James owned 2/3 of Willow Creek, its lawns, its roofs, its secrets. He'd stayed silent, biding his time, but her latest power trip snapped the leash. The petty fines, the double standards, the way she strutted like a queen. It was enough. Karen thought she ruled the roost, but James held the deed to the henhouse. That night, he sat in his cluttered garage, papers spread across a workbench, titles, contracts, a map of the neighborhood dotted with his conquests. The HOA bylaws glared back. Majority ownership meant majority vote. Karen's reign rested on her loud voice and a loyal clique, but James had the numbers. He'd kept his powder dry, dodging her radar, enduring her jabs to avoid tipping his hand. Now the game was shifting. She'd pushed too far, and he was done playing punching bag. With 67% in his pocket, he could call a meeting, rewrite the rules, dethrone her entirely. James cracked his knuckles, a rare grin breaking through. Karen's kingdom was about to crumble. She just didn't know it yet. The mechanic was ready to reclaim his turf. The Willow Creek community room buzzed with unease as folding chairs scraped against the linoleum floor. Karen Mitchell had called an emergency HOA meeting with 48 hours notice. Her email blast citing urgent updates to maintain property values. Residents filed in, some curious, others grumbling under the flickering fluorescent lights. Karen stood at the front, clipboard in hand, her lips pursed into a thin line of triumph. Behind her, a projector hummed, casting a glow on a screen that promised trouble. James Carter slipped in quietly, taking a seat near the back, his face a mask of calm. The $500 fine burned in his memory, but beneath it, his secret simmered. 67% ownership, his ace in the hole, waiting to be played. Karen tapped her pen against the clipboard, silencing the room. "We've got a problem," she declared, her voice sharp as a whip. "Too many cars cluttering our streets, dragging down our aesthetic." She clicked the projector and up flashed a new rule. Effective immediately, each household is limited to 2 vehicles, parked in the garage. No exceptions. Murmurs rippled, shock, annoyance, disbelief. Linda, Karen's flamingo-loving ally, nodded primly, while Mr. Patel muttered, "My garage is storage, not parking." Karen ignored them, clicking again. A photo filled the screen. James's driveway, his pickup, sedan and hatchback glaring in high definition. "This," she sneered, "looks like a junkyard, not Willow Creek." The room turned, eyes darting to James. Karen's tone dripped venom. "Some people think they're above the rules. This ends now. 2 cars or fines triple." She pointed at the image like a prosecutor, her slideshow a parade of petty power. His truck's faded paint, the hatchback's dented bumper. "We're not a trailer park," she snapped, her click smirking in sync. James sat still, hands folded, his pulse steady despite the jab. He'd expected this. Karen's vendetta had teeth now, a rule tailor-made to bury him. 3 cars for a family of 4, trapped by a garage packed with tools and bikes. She'd boxed him in, or so she thought. Whispers grew. Some nodded with, "Karen," others shifted uncomfortably. "That's my 3rd kid's ride," James could have said, but he didn't, not yet. He watched her strut, her tape-measure tyranny on full display, every word tightening the noose she didn't know she'd hung around herself. The bylaws danced in his mind, majority rules, and he held 67%. This wasn't just a meeting, it was her stage, and he was the trapdoor. Karen clicked to her final slide, a smug "vote now" glowing. James leaned back, a faint smile tugging at his lips. She thought she'd won, but he'd been counting houses, not cars. The clock was ticking, and his moment was close. The Willow Creek community room crackled with tension as Karen Mitchell raised her hand, signaling the vote on her draconian parking rule. "All in favor of the 2-car limit," she barked, her voice slicing through the murmurs, her clipboard. A gavel poised to drop. Her clique, Linda, Bob, a few others, lifted their hands like trained puppets, smirks curling. The projector glowed with James Carter's driveway, a silent accusation pinning him to the wall. Karen's eyes gleamed. This was her checkmate, her kingdom cemented. But then a chair scraped. James stood, slow and deliberate, his broad frame casting a shadow that swallowed her spotlight. "Hold up," he said, voice low but firm, cutting. The rooms hummed to a hush. Every head swiveled, some curious, some annoyed. As he stepped forward, a manila folder in his grease-stained hands. Karen's brow furrowed, her pen freezing mid-tap. "What's this?" she snapped. But James didn't flinch. He opened the folder, papers rustling as he spread them on the table. Deeds, titles, contracts, a legal arsenal 5 years in the making. "I've got something to say," he continued, his gaze locking hers. "You think you run this place. And Karen, check these." He slid the first deed forward. Lot 12, Axel Holdings, then another. Lot 19, Gear Shift Properties. Gasps rippled as he kept going. 34 properties, 67% of Willow Creek, all traced back to him through his shell companies. "I own this neighborhood," he said, voice rising, steady as steel. "Been buying it up quiet-like while you've been measuring grass and fining me for breathing. HOA bylaws say majority rules. That's me, I'm the real president here." The room erupted, shouts, whispers, a chair clattering as Mr. Patel leapt up wide-eyed. Linda's hand dropped, her flamingo-loving loyalty shaken. Karen's face drained to ash, her clipboard slipping an inch. That's impossible," she stammered, snatching a deed, her manicured nails trembling as she scanned it. The signatures, the dates, the notary seals, undeniable. Her empire of petty fines and tape measures crumbled in real time, her jaw slack, eyes darting like a cornered animal. "You can't," she started. But James cut her off, stepping closer, his mechanics calm now, a warrior's edge. "I can, and I will. Your rules, done, your fines, over. This HOA's mine now, and it's gonna serve everyone, not just your buddies." The crowd buzzed. Some cheered, others gaped, phones slipping out to capture the fall. Karen's reign, built on intimidation and double standards, shattered against James's quiet conquest. He stood tall, papers fanned like a crown. The mechanic, who'd outplayed the Queen. Her vote died unspoken. His reign had just begun. The Willow Creek community room trembled with the aftershock of James Carter's revelation. 67% ownership. The HOA's throne snatched from Karen Mitchell's grasp. Her clipboard clattered to the table, her face a mask of disbelief. But James wasn't done. "You've bullied us long enough," he said, his voice a steady hammer as he pulled another stack from his folder. Evidence, thick and brutal, of Karen's reign of terror. The crowd leaned in, phones aloft, as he laid out her sins like a prosecutor at trial. This isn't just about cars or lawns. It's about abuse. Hers. He started with a USB drive, plugging it into the projector. Grainy security footage flickered to life. Karen, cloaked in a dark hoodie, creeping through Mr. Patel's yard at 3 a.m., tape measure glinting in the moonlight. She knelt, measuring grass blades, her lips moving in silent triumph as she jotted notes. Gasps erupted. Patel shot up, shouting, "That's my lawn! She fined me $200!" Another clip. Karen in Mrs. Lopez's garden, snapping marigold stems to prove they were too tall, her smirk caught in infrared. "She's sneaking around like a thief," James said, "but she's the one robbing us." Next came the money trail. James tossed bank statements onto the table. HOA dues, thousands funneled into maintenance funds, then traced to a contractor's invoice, $8,000 for a backyard overhaul at 17 Willow Lane. Karen's address. "New deck, hot tub pergola, all on our dime," James said, his finger stabbing the paper. The room boiled. Linda's jaw dropped, her loyalty cracking while Bob muttered, "I paid for that?" Receipts piled up. Karen's HOA account had siphoned $15,000 over 2 years, every fine a brick in her private oasis. This wasn't oversight, James growled. This was theft. Then the knockout blow. Leaked emails, hacked from Karen's own inbox by a fed-up resident, James. Wouldn't name. He clicked the projector again, and her words glowed. Need to push out the riffraff? Patel's clutter? Lopez's tacky flowers don't fit our vision? Another. Triple fines on Carter? He's not our kind. The crowd roared. Anger, betrayal, vindication. Karen's standards weren't rules. They were a purge, targeting anyone who didn't kiss her ring. Her clique shrank in their seats, faces paling as her venom spilled into the open. You didn't just fine us, James said, turning to her. You tried to erase us. Karen staggered back, her hands gripping the table, her voice a rasp. This is slander, lies. But the footage, the numbers, the emails, they were ironclad, her empire of petty power stripped bare. You're done, James said, his mechanics calm now a judge's gavel. We're not your pawns anymore. Cheers broke out. Mr. Patel clapped. Mrs. Lopez wiped tears, the room alive with fury and relief. Karen's eyes darted, searching for an exit, but the walls she'd built were caving in. James stood over his evidence, a mountain of her misdeeds. The mechanic who turned her kingdom to ash. Willow Creek wasn't hers anymore. It was theirs, and the reckoning was just beginning. The Willow Creek community room pulsed with righteous chaos as James Carter's evidence, security clips, bank records, damning emails, lay bare Karen Mitchell's reign of greed and spite. Her clipboard trembled in her hands, her face a ghostly, white as the crowd's fury swelled. Shouts of thief and get her out ricocheting off the walls. She stumbled back, eyes wild, and bolted for the door, her sensible loafers slapping the linoleum in a desperate retreat. But James stepped into her path, his broad frame a wall, his voice steady. Not so fast, Karen. HOA bylaws, Article 7, Section 3. No officer may abandon a meeting under dispute. You're staying. She froze, cornered by her own rules, her breath ragged as James turned to the room. We've seen enough, he said, holding up the bylaws like a sword. I move for an immediate vote. Dissolve this HOA and start fresh. Who's with me? Hands shot up, Mr. Patel's, Mrs. Lopez's, dozens more, anger and hope surging as one. Linda and Bob, Karen's once loyal shadows, sat silent, heads bowed, their allegiance shattered. All opposed, James called. Karen's hand twitched, but no one joined her. The tally was clear, 42-3. The old HOA, her kingdom of fines and favoritism, was dead. James didn't pause. Next, elect a new board. I nominate myself as president. Fair rules, no secrets. Who's in? Cheers erupted, hands rising again, a landslide burying Karen's legacy. By night's end, a new HOA stood, James at the helm, flanked by Patel and Lopez, a trio vowing transparency over tyranny. Karen's power evaporated, her clique powerless, as the room chanted, "Out! Out!" She slunk to her seat, defeated, her reign reduced to whispers and glares. Days later, she was gone. The for sale sign stabbed into her lawn, hot tub and all, mocked her exit. Willow Creek watched her pack, no goodbyes, just the clatter of moving boxes under a grey sky. She fled in disgrace, landing in Pine Ridge, another HOA-run enclave 2 towns over. Karma struck fast. Within a week, a notice hit her new mailbox, $300. Fine for parking her SUV an inch over the line. Residents there smirked. Karen, once the enforcer, was now the fined, her tape-measure days haunting her in reverse. Back in Willow Creek, James led with a mechanic's pragmatism. No petty fines. No midnight lawn checks. Dues fixed potholes, not patios. Rules served, not suffocated. The air lightened, kids played, marigolds bloomed, 3 cars sat proud in driveways. Karen's shadow lifted, and Willow Creek breathed free, reclaimed by a man who'd turned her. Game against her. The neighborhood wasn't just his by deed, it was his by right, won through grit and truth. Willow Creek woke to a new dawn after Karen Mitchell's fall, the air fresher without her clipboard's shadow. James Carter, once the fined mechanic, now stood as HOA president, his grease-stained hands steering a revolution. The new HOA charter, inked on a picnic table with Patel and Lopez nodding beside him, was a promise. Transparency, fairness, community over control. Gone were the days of $500 fines for 3 cars or midnight grass audits. Dues, once siphoned, to Karen's hot tub, now patched potholes, planted trees, fixed the playground slide tie from down the street, had cracked. James's rule was simple. This place is ours. Let's make it work for us. The change rippled fast. Kids' basketballs bounced on driveways again, the thunk-thunk a soundtrack to evenings free of violation slips. Mrs. Lopez's marigolds bloomed unchecked, red, yellow, wild, her garden a defiant splash against Karen's, old too garish edicts. Mr. Patel strung fairy lights across his porch, unchallenged, their glow winking through the dusk. No more tape measures, no more sneers. Residents painted mailboxes, parked boats, lived without dread. Meetings shifted from battlegrounds to barbecues. James listened, not lectured, his notepad filled with ideas, not infractions. "What do we need?" he'd ask, and Willow Creek answered with voices long silenced. The numbers told the story, too. Within a month of Karen's exit, real estate buzzed. For sale signs vanished, replaced by sold stickers. A local agent clocked it. Property values jumped 15%, buyers drawn to a cul-de-sac where freedom trumped fascism. "It's not just houses now," she said, clipboard free. "It's a community." Families stayed, new ones arrived, lured by tales of a neighborhood that fought back and won. The junkyard Karen mocked became a badge of pride. James's 3 cars, a symbol of defiance turned victory. Word spread beyond the streets. One crisp Saturday, a sleek hybrid pulled up. A woman stepping out. Elena Ruiz, a documentary filmmaker. With sharp eyes and a handheld camera, she'd seen the viral whispers of Willow Creek's uprising online, tracked James down. "I want to tell this," she said, sitting across from him at Hope Brew, coffee steaming between them. How a mechanic took down a dictator HOA and built something real. People need to hear it. James rubbed his neck, uneasy with the spotlight, but nodded. If it helps someone else fight back, sure. Filming started the next week, interviews with Patel's twinkling lights behind him, Lopez tending her flowers, kids dunking hoops. James walked Elena through it all. The fines, the deeds, the vote, his quiet grit, the thread tying it together. Willow Creek wasn't just thriving, it was a beacon, proof a community could rise from petty tyranny. Values soared, yes, but so did trust. Neighbors waved, shared tools, rebuilt what Karen had broken. James stood on his porch watching Ty. Shoot baskets, a rare piece settling in. The HOA was theirs now, and it was good. The tale of James Carter and Willow Creek's uprising against Karen Mitchell's HOA tyranny unfolds as a quiet parable for those of us in life's later years. For older souls, it whispers a truth etched in our lines. Power, even petty, crumbles when challenged with patience and proof. James, a mechanic past his prime in others' eyes, teaches us that age doesn't dim strategy or strength. His 5-year chess game, buying homes, biding time, mirrors the slow wisdom we've earned. Battles aren't always loud, but they're won by those who endure. In our own lives, facing overbearing neighbors, rigid rules, or dismissive systems, we can borrow his playbook, gather facts, build leverage, strike when the iron's hot. Karen's fall reveals another gem. Corruption festers where we let it. Her fines, her theft, thrived on silence. Ours, too, when we shrug at unfairness, be it a cheated bill or a sidelined voice. Age gifts us perspective to spot these shadows. We've seen HOA Karens in bosses, bureaucrats, even family. The lesson: speak up. Our years lend weight to our words, a gravelly firmness that can topple petty thrones. James's evidence, tapes, emails, shows preparation trumps rage. We can document, rally, turn whispers into wins, whether it's a condo board or a care home click. Willow Creek's rebirth offers hope. Communities heal when we reclaim them. Older folks often feel the world's moved on, our streets quieter, our influence thinner, but James proves we can still shape it. Plant that garden, host that potluck, lead that fight. Our hands, though wrinkled, build bridges. His HOA flipped from oppression to uplift. We too can nudge our corners toward fairness, mentoring the young or mending the frayed. Values rose. 15% yes, but so did trust. A currency we can trade in smiles, not just dollars. Finally, this story murmurs. Legacy lingers in quiet stands. Karen fled, shamed. James stayed, revered. As we age, we weigh what we'll leave. Photo albums, lessons, a name. Fight the small fights, it says, against a fine, a slight, a wrong, not for glory, but for those who follow. Our twilight isn't retreat, it's a chance to sow justice, one deed at a time, proving we're never too old to turn a cul-de-sac or a life into something worth living.